I have been working through the Hebrew and the Septuagint text, looking grammatically at both and doing a comparison of both the Hebrew text and the LXX or the Septuagint. And I'd like to continue that. We are now at verse 6 to 9. I'm reading it in Hebrew and then also talking about the grammar and doing an inductive grammar study of both the Hebrew and the Septuagint text. And then doing a comparison and looking how the New Testament uses it as well. So now we're at verse 7, and we're looking at the decree where the king now speaks, and he is going to say what the Lord has said about him. Remember, this is a coronation psalm, and so the king speaks. The psalmist has him speaking about what Yahweh has determined for him. Notice verse 7, Asapra el chok, Adonai amar elai beni ata, ani hayom yaliticha. I will declare concerning the decree. The Lord said unto me, my son, you are my son. I today have begotten you. Notice asapra is from the root safar, which means to speak or to tell. And notice here we have a PL, imperfect, first common singular, from the root safar. We have a chatef pathak, followed by the pathak and the doubling of the middle radical, which is the phi here, or the P. Notice asapra basically then is, like I said, the PL stem because of the vowel pattern. So I will tell concerning the decree, the hope, that which is etched in stone, so to speak. The Lord said, Adonai Amar, Amar is just your cow, perfect, third masculine singular from Amar. The Lord said unto me, Beni ata. Notice the emphatic emphasis here. My son, you are. Ani, I. Here we have the personal pronoun, first person, and it goes with yeliticha. We would need ani, but it is here making it emphatic. I, hayom, today, yeliticha, I have begotten you. The root is yalat, to beget, and notice it's a cow perfect, third masculine, cow perfect, first common singular, followed by the pronominal suffix, second masculine singular in the cha. So from the root yalad. So I have begotten you. In other words, this language of being begotten by God is a language that we know from the ancient Near East. When a king was being coronated, it was that same language was used. We find it in a Ugaritic text, and basically I think it's a very common language of coronation, being begotten. So I today have begotten you. Sha'al mimeni v'tena goyim nachalatecha v'achuzatecha afse aretz. Ask from me, and I will give you the nations for your inheritance and the ends of the earth for your possession. Notice sha'al is the imperative, the cow imperative, second masculine singular from sha'al. So ask from me, and I will give you. Notice etana is from the root natan. It's a pei nun root. And here we have a cow imperfect, first common singular from natan. So entana became etna, that noon of the stem of Natan has assimilated by progressive assimilation into the top. So I will give the goyim, the nations, as your inheritance. In other words, I'll give you all the nations as your inheritance, is what the text is saying. And then the second phrase, and your possession, the ends of the earth. Ahuzatacha is your possession. Notice cha, your pronominal suffix, second masculine singular. And so the ends of the earth as your possession. Now we come to verse 9. Teroim b'shevet barzel, kikli yotzer tenapatzem. You shall break them with the rod of iron, as vessels of a potter, or as a vessel of a potter, you shall dash them to pieces. Notice teruim is the cow imperfect second masculine singular from ra'ah. It's if we're reading it that way, you shall break them, it would be a double ayin root. You shall break them, and many would argue that parallels the second clause in the synonymous parallelism, as vessel of a potter, you shall dash them to pieces. So teruim from ra'ah, double ayin, cow imperfect, second masculine singular. You shall break them with a rod of iron. Notice shevet barzel, two nouns in construct. And then as the vessel of a potter. Notice yotzer is from the root yatsar, the cow participle, masculine singular. Notice the cholim vav, the o vowel, followed by the tseri. So as vessel of a potter, you shall dash them to pieces. Notice tenapatsa is from nafatz, to dash to pieces. It's the cow imperfect, second masculine singular. And notice we have the shava pathak again, doubling of the middle radical. From nafatz, the phi here is doubled. And you have your pronominal suffix, third masculine plural. So we're looking at how the king is given authority by Yahweh to judge. And that's why the psalmist will then go on to ask the rebelling kings to halt the rebellion. So here we see the authority that Yahweh has given to the coronated king. And we'll get into the New Testament and the Septuagint now. And I would like to read it and then talk about a brief commentary and application. Notice the Septuagint reads, after we saw, I was installed king by him upon Zion, his holy mountain, declaring the decree of the Lord. This verse 7 reads, Kyrios epipras me quias mu esu, ego semeron gegenika set. The Lord said to me, you are my son. I today have begotten you. Notice epe is from Lego. I always remember when I had Greek in college, the professor said, Lego, I say, for Lego. So again, it's from Lego. It's the aorist indicative active, third person singular. The root changes to apon in the aorist. Here it's third person. So the Lord said to me, you are my son. Huias mu esu. Notice A is the present indicative active. You are, and it's from a me, to be, second masculine singular. So you are my son. I today have begotten you. Notice gegenika is from genao, to beget. It's the perfect indicative active, first person singular from genao. So I today have begotten you. Notice the reduplication in the gamma and the epsilon, indicative of a perfect as well as the kappa. So I today have begotten you. I tesai, verse 8, par amu kaidose soy ethne tain kleranamian su, kai tain kataska sensu ta per perata tes gaze. Ask from me, notice, and I will give you the nation for your the nations for your inheritance, and the ends of the earth for your possession. Notice, I-te-sai is your aorist imperative, second masculine singular from aiteo. Lusai, lusato, when we think of if we're using luo as a model. So that's the imperative second person singular. So ask from me and I will give. Notice doso is from didomi, to give. When you think of the principal parts of didomi, doso, edoka, dedoka, or edathane, the aorist passive, and so forth. So this is your future indicative active, first person singular from didomi. So ask from me and I will give to you the nations for your inheritance and the ends of the earth for your possession. So the Hebrew and Greek are very parallel here. But now we come to a difference, and that's in verse 9. Poimane saltus in hrabdo sidera hos skuas kerameos sun tripses autus. You will shepherd them, literally, with an iron scepter. As a vessel of a potter, you will dash them to pieces. Notice poi manes is from poi mino, to shepherd. It is your future indicative active, second person singular from poi mino. You will shepherd them with a scepter, with an iron scepter. As vessel of a potter, you will dash them to pieces. The root here is suntribo, to break or crush. And notice you have your future indicative active, second person singular from suntribo. Suntribo, when you add your sigma to it, changes to a psi. That is, the beta and the sigma changes to psi. So suntrip tripso became suntripses. Excuse me, with that psi. Suntripses became suntripses. In other words, the sigma, the beta and the sigma changes to psi in your future indicative active, and here it's the second person singular. So we have a different read here. If we read the Hebrew teroim as a double ayin, as a resh ayin ayin, you will crush. And many would feel that best fits the parallelism, the Hebrew parallelism. However, poimanes means to shepherd. A king was called a shepherd. And one of the things that a king would do is also judge his the enemies of his people in his shepherding work and so forth. So I am wondering, and I wouldn't be super dogmatic, but I am wondering if the Septuagint translators took the tav, the resh, the ayin, and the mem of the Hebrew, instead of reading it as the Masoretes did, teroim, as double ayin, they read it as tirim, which would mean, if that's the case, the root would be resh ayin he, which means to shepherd. But the he, tirim, would have dropped out in the consonantal text, and so would the ayin, no doubt, historically have dropped out if we have a double ayin root. So I'm wondering if the Septuagint translators read this from the root ra'ah, resh, basically ayin hey, rather than the resh ayin ayin, which would be the Masoretic reading. You will crush them. And so again, that may account, and I'm not being dogmatic, just suggesting it, that may account as to why we have poimines. You will shepherd them. And this will be quoted in the New Testament and applied to the second coming of Jesus Christ. I would like to now just briefly do a New Testament application. We have seen, looking at the Hebrew text, that we're looking historically at the coronation day of a king who would judge those on the authority of Yahweh that would continue the rebellion. And so the psalmist will then go on to say, stop the rebellion. But then as we come to the New Testament, in a sermon that the Apostle Paul preached in Acts chapter 13, he applies this text to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. He says, God has fulfilled this to our children by raising Jesus, as also it is written in the second Psalm, Huias muesu, ego semeran gegenikase. In other words, here the text is quoted exactly from the Septuagint, and Paul applies it, and Luke records it to the resurrection. In other words, he goes on to say David in his own generation basically fell asleep and was placed with his fathers. But he whom God raised up, verse 37, he did not see corruption. And he goes on to talk about how you have forgiveness of sins through the coronated, resurrected Christ. So the New Testament clearly applies this to the resurrection. The coronation day is, can we say, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That's his, can I say, demonstrated coronation as the reigning eternal king. But then we have in Revelation 19 a further reference to the Septuagint where John writes about Christ coming back. He's coming back on a white horse, picture of a leader, a king coming back to judge. And he judges the world by the work of his cross. But then we go on in verse 15 as he's describing that. And out of his mouth is going a sharp sword in order that with it he might smite the nation. Kai autas poimane autus in rabdo sidera. That is, and he will shepherd them with a rod of iron. And again, I think he's saying Christ will judge the world someday by his word. And like a king, he will shepherd, meaning in this context, bring judgment. And so we're looking at the second advent of Christ. And clearly, John is referring back to the Septuagint when he talks, when he uses the verb poimane from poimino, he will shepherd them. Remember, the Septuagint read poimines, you will shepherd them. Same root, poimino. So it is clear here that the Holy Spirit led the writer of Revelation, John, whom I accept to be the author, to quote or allude to the Septuagint in writing this wonderful, wonderful apocalypse, the book of Revelation. And so, again, I hope the Septuagint and the Hebrew comparative study and trying to compare it with some of the grammar can be helpful. Again, ra'ah, is it a double ayin, or ra'ah, is it a lamed hey root historically? And without the vowel, you could not tell the difference. So I'm thinking the Septuagint translators followed the verb meaning to shepherd. So again, thank you for listening to this video. The good news is according to New Testament reading and theology, that the coronation day is the resurrection, and that Christ is coming back someday. And the challenge to us will be that if we know Christ, we have, can I say, the assurance by faith of a resurrected life, because he is the resurrected and coronated King.